Welcome to the Snackscast episode 4. Today I sit down with America's brightest personality in rugby, Dallen Stanford. We talk a little bit about his influences in the game, both on and off the field, how he got started in commentating and what it looks like for him to be proficient at that at a weekly basis, projects he's passionate about, and things that he's really excited to see in the game of rugby. I hope you enjoy this show as much as I enjoyed recording it. So I'm privileged to have a guest on the show today, Mr. Dallen Stanford, aka the Rugby Corner. Dallen, how are you doing?
I'm doing marvelous, and thanks for thinking of me, Snacks, for the Snacks cast. I think it's been taken off like wildfire in California.
Yeah. Speaking of wildfires, how are you guys doing out there?
We're doing well. Luckily, the one bonus about living in the concrete jungle in Los Angeles is that nothing will get to you, even in terms of a fire. But I will say, driving around to Malibu and that side over the weekend, oh man, it is devastating to see all the houses that have been burnt to the ground. We also did get affected by the air pollution. The smoke was terrible. We could smell it out here. We kind of live probably in between downtown and the water. And so the smoke was still here and affecting people. My wife and I went across and did a few donations and things like that. People have really been generous in opening their homes and opening their hearts to helping people out. But yeah, it's crazy that there are so many fires all over California, not just in one place.
Yeah, and it's weird, like having moved to the Midwest and people have like bonfires all the time out here, and I was a little skeptical or sketchy when I saw the first one during the summer, and my missus was like, "Well, why are you so afraid of the fire?" And I said, "Because Californians, we have wildfires all the time." And now she's seen a couple, and I asked you about that straight away because some people in the public saw your Facebook post about you with the mask on the other day, and they wanted to make sure you're good. So that's good
Yes,
to hear.
I will say, one thing about social media, which I only realized afterwards, is you be careful what image you portray out there. And I didn't mean to, because people like, because
Yeah.
again, the photo I put up was the most drastic photo I saw, which was the plume of smoke over Malibu, which looked crazy. And then I didn't mean to say that I was in there. And the mask was because we were, difficulty in breathing and stuff like that. And then it looked like the one photo I posted, a bunch of supplies. Well, those are just supplies we were just dropping off. So it looked like we were evacuating and it was Armageddon. That's what it looked like. So
Yeah.
social media sensations, I will be careful when I post the next time.
That's awesome, mate. Well, we're glad you're doing
Yeah.
well, you and the missus. So tell me a little bit about some of the things you've got going on these days, Dallen. You're a busy man all over the place.
Sure, Snacksy. Well, I do enjoy seeing you all over the countryside in the different roles that you have as well. Right now, I'm working on the Premiership Rugby partnership with Friends of the British Council, which is a US nonprofit that helps British organizations and partners in their American interests. And through that organization, I'm the director of sports partnerships, but really focused on the rugby side of things. And other side of it, commentating, that's an absolute passion of mine and something that I got a chance to do a lot of weekends. So that's really fun. And then I still consult just a little bit here and there for Play Rugby USA in Los Angeles. That's also another passion, working with the young kids and promoting, rugby's values and providing role models for young kids that might not have them in their lives, And then, of course, a little website on the side, the rugbycorner.com, has some rugby videos and things like that. And then, of course, a part-time goose stepper on the beach here in Santa Monica.
Speaking of goose stepping, that's interesting. You still get to play? How often?
Yes, I try to go out when there aren't any fires. I try to go out actually 3 times a week. We play Tuesday, Thursday nights, and then we play Sunday mornings. And it's super fun because the ages range from 20 years old to we've got people out there who are in their late 50s. And because it's on the sand, most of us are still fairly sluggish in the thick sand. So even you would look out of depth there.
Yeah, I'd need some snowshoes to stay on top of that sand. That's awesome that you get to play still. You're playing in Southern California for a long time. Oxy Boys, Tiger, lots of sevens, obviously with the Eagles as well. What's getting to play touch on a weekly basis? What's something you enjoy about playing?
The great thing about team sport, and I've always loved this about it, is that as a byproduct of having fun and playing as something and doing something with your friends, you get fit as well. So there's those kind of things come through it naturally, which is brilliant. What I love about rugby is that what makes it so exciting is that the game is unpredictable. You have so much fun. I actually commentate the games too. So now that is something I've just grown up with. So for me, it's like it's a bit of work and play at the same time. So merging those together, but also the community. I think that's the biggest thing. When I first came to America 15 years ago, I knew one person in LA. He introduced me to a rugby club here, the Oxy Old Boys you mentioned, and actually James Walker was my first coach and second friend ever here in America. And to this day we're very close, and we're actually working on the Premiership side of things together as well. But it was the community that opened up, myself to meet new people, to travel the world, and then you make those lifelong friends as well.
Yeah. So how long after you arriving in America did you started to get noticed by the Eagles, and sort of what did that look like? Going from Oxy Old Boys, meeting James Walker, getting involved in the SoCal scene to getting up to the national scene. How did that look like?
Yes,
what did that look like for you?
Yes, well, so to be 100% honest, I came to America after I finished college. So I studied marketing, and I was keen to travel for 6 months or so, or maybe a year, and experience a different culture and something else. And so a friend of mine was here in LA and said, "Hey, come on, play rugby, the Oxy Old Boys. The level is lower than what you would get in South Africa, but it's great fun." So I came out, had a brilliant time. It was a real mixed bag because we had, one or two really good players in the team, and then we had, a couple of parked cars as well. And so it was cool. It was a nice mix of level where it was super fun, and especially the post match was really great as well. And so that was kind of my initial introduction to rugby. Two things that stood out to me though, that American rugby back then was ahead of the curve in South Africa. Number one was the women's game. And is currently still the women's game, but that was really amazing. We never had any women's rugby when I was around growing up in South Africa, and so coming to my first practice, seeing the women's team train, I was like, oh wow, that's fantastic. And then the other thing was 7-a-side rugby, and so despite the Southern Hemisphere promoting a free-flowing game and attractive rugby brand, 7-a-side 15 years ago was an afterthought. And so coming to California and playing in all these wonderful summer tournaments, that was really the highlight for me my first year. We would go to San Diego and play in all those tournaments there. Then we'd go to Santa Barbara. We played the Midnight Sevens in Las Vegas. It was these wonderful destinations as a foreigner, but also playing sevens in areas that had beautiful grass and the soft, beautiful conditions. So I get it when I speak to my East Coast friends, and they're like, we don't really love the summer that much because, or Texas, the ground is so hard and you can't dive for the champagne rugby tries and stuff like that. So it was a complete eye opener. To answer your question, after playing a season or two at Oxy, we merged with Belmont Shore. James Walker went across to Belmont Shore and we followed him there. And then we were introduced to some brilliant players like Peter Seo and, Pete Dahl and all those guys, Matt Hawkins and the guys that came through later. And so we eventually got a chance we would play OMBAC every year. And OMBAC back then in the 7-a-side had won the most national titles out of any club. They would consistently go to nationals and finish in the top 5. So we didn't know this. We played them casually every Saturday and would lose by 1 try. And one year we beat them and went qualified for nationals, and we didn't really know what nationals was. I had no idea it was the best teams in the country. We just thought we're going to another tournament called nationals and whatever it was. And in that we went and we played 6 games. We only lost 1 match, and we came 5th. We won the plate. And straight off the tournament, Al Caravelli came to me and said, "Listen, I'd like you to come to our next Sevens camp to try out for the US Sevens team." And so initially I was like, "Wow, thank you. That's a huge honor, and that's really cool. You noticed us play." But I'm not American. I've got married recently, but I have a South African passport. And he said, according to World Rugby, if you've played in the country for 3 years and you're becoming a citizen, which I was, then you're eligible to play for your adopted country. So, that was just a real eye-opener. I didn't even know how that worked. Went to the tryouts and things went well. And then so I suppose 3 or 4 years later, after I arrived in the country, I was playing sevens for the USA, and my friends were tuning in watching the Sevens World Series, and they're like, "Hold on, is that Dallen Stanford playing for America? What the hell?" They recognize that nose anywhere.
Yeah. It's interesting that you note that sort of that time frame. I want to say the mid 2000s in the summer in Southern California. Some of that rugby sevens in the summer from Ombeck, Oxy, Belmont, Santa Monica there for a while. Back Bay had some good teams with like Jason Raven. That was some of the most exciting rugby I've ever seen, been a part of. I used to go as a forward just to get better at skills and run with Craig Hartley and those Ombeck guys. And the level that, Dave DeSorbo and you and Matt Hawkins and all those guys were at back in the day, it was impressive, man. It was impressive.
It was super fun. And so you're right, Craig Hartley is so vocal, because I remember we used to play Ombeck all the time and you could hear him shouting on the side. But again, just one of those individuals that is so passionate about the game. And I'll never forget, he really was helpful at a couple of the training camps before making the national team. You had to do a fitness training every single time you went to camp. Now, back then, what people don't realize is we had full-time jobs. So we were working, to put food on the table for our families. And then at the same time, training in the afternoons or early mornings, and then going to go on the weekend and to compete against 20 other people from around the country and try and make the national team. So it was a different setup then. But Hartley was very good with helping us with the fitness and extra. I remember going on Sunday because I was asked to be one of the restart kickers, and my drop kicks were very average at best. So he came along and we'd meet out at a field and help me with the drop kicking and some of the fitness things. And really it was super helpful. But you're right, that competition and that rivalry. Raven, by the way, who still can put the rugby boots on and play. Rugby Town Sevens, he was going to take the field as well. Really, a lot of good characters came out of the SoCal vibes, and some of us played together, obviously, for many years after that. A lot of good times,
Yeah, no, it was great. So, Dallen, speaking a little bit more about your Eagles, your time with the Eagles, is there any sort of memory or time that stands out in your mind that was special for you during that?
Yes, I thought about this leading up to this call. There certainly always some special moments. Number one is your very first time running out to represent your country, or even if it's your adopted country. And for me, that was at the Wellington Sevens. Running out on the field, wearing Eagles jersey with your teammates that you've really trained with, for months in advance, and you've put your body to the limits and mental strength as well. To be out there was just an amazing honor. I mean, as a young kid growing up in South Africa, it was always my dream to play international sport. My father was a huge supporter, and him and my mom would always be at every single rugby game. And actually, my mom would be surprisingly, or not surprisingly, she would be running along the sidelines of a game. And this is me playing under 13. And she would be screaming so loud that the referee sometimes would stop the game and be like, could you please tell that parent just to tone it down a bit? I'm trying to focus on this match. And so there were some brilliant moments there. But yeah, cut to many years later, playing international sport. And when my dad was still alive, this is one of my favorite memories. He got a chance with my mom to come to America and watch me play at Petco Park in San Diego. At the International USA Sevens. And then again, when we played in South Africa, the George Sevens, they were there again with my grandmother, who was around at the time too. So it just, it was very special, kind of full circle moments for me, for my family to kind of see that hard work and effort pay off, and for them to be along and watch that as well. It just magical. But just touching on that, I will say what was the interesting thing was, I remember clearly kicking a conversion. Todd Clever had run to score, but was taken out before the line. So he did one of these brilliant Hollywood dives with his hair flowing in the background, and we got given a penalty try, and we beat Kenya in that game. And a penalty try, but then you still had to kick the conversion. So while I was lining up to kick the conversion, there was all these wild fans at Wellington, a lot of them drinking and not even watching. But I remember feeling like, wow, there's 40,000 in the cake tin. Here I am kicking a conversion. Cut to 5 days later, I'm in the middle of Burbank area at some little soccer field, and there's baseball being played on the sideline. There's not a hint of rugby poles, and there I am aiming for a drop kick conversion, practicing against a lamppost. And I thought to myself, wow, and nobody knows what I'm doing. They're like, oh, there's a funny South African looking guy over there, funny talker. So I just was laughing to myself about, wow, it's weird, the moments in life. And of course, back then, obviously rugby was not nearly as popular as it is now here in the States.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned how far we've come, and now arguably you're one of the most popular personalities we have here in the United States. And that started with your Eagles, debut. And how did you go, or what sort of gave you an idea to go from playing, a little bit of coaching, and what made you take the risk into commentating, right? That's where you're at now. We've seen you're blowing up huge on the world rugby stage for that. Give me a little background on that. What made you have the confidence to take that risk?
Yeah, good question, Snacks. Well, like your snacking, I also started at a young age with commentary. And I mentioned about the kind of playing touch rugby and commentating. I suppose it's always been in me to narrate things. It obviously irritates my wife at times. When she's in the kitchen. Oh, what a marvelous catch that is! The toast popping out of the thing. That's a bit of 12th man humor there. But no, so what I've always been interested in is been interested in the sport of rugby. I've always been interested in the values that the sport bring, and that really came about growing up in South Africa during apartheid, near the end of apartheid, and witnessing the 1995 Rugby World Cup in South Africa as a young 16-year-old South African. Growing up in a school that had people from all walks of life where the previous generation didn't. I think that was important for me personally growing up and seeing what Nelson Mandela did, seeing how the nation came together for those matches. They were just sports games, but in the end, a country was at stake as well. How would they react to the first non-white president of South Africa? So those were really wonderful moments for me growing up. And, despite the tragic setup that apartheid had, there were positives, coming through that. And for me personally, I just wanted to make sure that wherever I went in the world, I was involved in something positive. And so Play Rugby USA was that for me for many years, working with kids from backgrounds that generally might not have opportunities to showcase the sports values and life values and lessons just through a fun game. And that kind of where it came through. And so getting back to my involvement in rugby after playing, I always wanted to be involved in media or something involved with that. So I actually went to the Rugby World Cup to New Zealand in 2011 as the men's Eagles media manager. And then I went in 2013 to the Sevens World Cup in Moscow as the US men and women's Sevens media manager. So I kind of got a media side background there. I was always interested in interviewing players because I knew the players really well, so that was always fun for me. But that kind of side of it, and then finally in 2012, I got a chance at Infinity Park in Glendale, Colorado, to do some sideline work and do some of those post-match interviews, and then do some color commentary with some legendary commentators and kind of see how they work and what the different roles do. And then I realized quickly that I prefer to be somebody calling the live action, to be the play-by-play commentator, as opposed to being an analyst who comes in and strategically says what is happening. I prefer to get caught up in the moment of the game, and that's probably why I'm a bit loud sometimes. And kind of that's how I got into it. But I will say there are so many wonderful lessons in taking on something new. Number one, I will say to anybody who wants to start something new or commentate is just to practice, right? Is to get out and practice as many times, even if you're on the side of the field with a loudspeaker. I've done that before when I started. Like, you're basically announcing the game, you only plugged into loudspeaker and people are watching and they're reacting to you live. Sometimes they like it, sometimes they don't, right? And everybody has their own, their own perception of what they like and what they don't. So don't be put off by some people if they said, "Oh, you know what? I'm not a fan of your commentary." Oh, that you're not going to please everybody in life, But if you enjoy it, you generally can bring out that emotion and have fun. Doesn't matter what you do, your passion will come through for it.
Okay. So you mentioned practice. How much time do you spend practicing and prepping for, say, a 15s match or a 7s match?
Yes. Another good question. So practice-wise, I would say, so first thing I would say, because I do get this a lot, people ask, "Hey, I'd like to start commentating. What do I need to do?" So when in that regard, you need to practice the actual game calling itself, which means you don't even need to be plugged into anything. You could literally have a game, on the go that you're watching with the sound off, and then you commentate that. And so I've seen people record themselves, their voiceover, and they've sent it, "Hey, how does this sound?" And the nice thing is there's so much rugby online. You can listen to the Northern Hemisphere commentators, the Southern Hemisphere, or even here in the US, just to get a sense of how are people doing it structurally, and then you kind of go through there, because you don't want to be in a situation where you talk all the time. So they're clear roles and things like that, But in terms of actual preparation for a game, well, if you are in the play-by-play role, the lead commentator, that is a lot of prep because you need to call, everybody's names as quickly as you can when they have the ball in hand, and know a little bit about each player as well. So I have a meticulous notes that I use a computer for that. Some people like to handwrite their notes, but I use a computer for that, and I have every single player's name down with, their bio information. Now, sometimes that information is not available. You need to go research the web for that, or go to the team profiles and things like that. Some of it's out of date. So I keep my own stats for USA Rugby as an example, because in the past it hasn't been as reliable. Now it's more reliable. So I would say I spend 2 or 3 days prepping for a test match or a 15s game. And then even then in it, you do make errors. You sometimes, misidentify somebody, or you might not. Also, this is the main thing for me is pronunciations of names. So with my kind of hybrid South African American accent, it'll be different to just an American caller saying something, or just an Italian caller. So it's to get the manager or the players to say their names properly, and you don't always have access to that, depending on how much help the managers are from the different teams. Now, sevens is way different. When you're doing a sevens tournament, it is a lot, because you've got 16 teams playing, and while you may know your schedule on the World Series for day one, you might not know what you're going to call on the next day. So you really actually have to prepare for everybody. And it's not like you're watching sevens every single day. So the prep there takes a lot longer. So a lot of times people are like, oh yeah, you're just commentating it, so you're free the whole week. I'm like, no. It's a massive amount of prep work, and you can tell when you listen to a commentator if they really know everybody and they really know what the information that they're bringing out there, if they're prepared or not.
Yeah, totally. You can definitely differentiate between someone who's done their homework and someone who's maybe not as polished.
Right.
In a sevens environment, right? And this is something that I learned about referees a while ago, but just recently learned about commentators, is that you sort of get selected based on your performance. Is that true? Or for the different games, like calling a final, you sort of have to work your way into having a good tournament to get to that. Is that true, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I would say, so let's start with the Sevens World Series. So for example, right now I've been booked for a few events for next year. And so how it works is there will probably be about 8 commentators, I'm just guessing, at some of the events, right? 6 to 8. And half of those will be play-by-play announcers. And so let's say there are going to be 4 play-by-play announcers. So I'm one of 4. Now, I've only been doing this on the World Series for 2 or 3 seasons now. So I would personally rank myself, going into it as the 4th play-by-play caller, because also they have very experienced announcers they bring in. And so the nice thing is then you see, you do the best you can, and you have as much fun and it's very collaborative. You work with everybody else in the broadcast crew, and then the producer will send a message and say, okay, this is day 2. These are the quarterfinals, and so generally each one will get a quarterfinal. But these are the semifinals, which to me means generally the top 2 callers or the top 2 best suited for that game. So that's kind of nice, because I've done a few semifinals where that means I'm ranked, in a way in the top 2, I suppose, or I'm better suited because South Africa is playing USA, or just South Africa is playing somebody else. So then they also want to be reflective of the accent. So I think that certainly helps me as well. And that's kind of how it goes there. In terms of the other bookings, look, I mean, I suppose you get some people that like certain commentators, and maybe that's how they get, they get a lot of work. I will say now with Major League Rugby having so many games, and then of course you've got ARC, you've got World Series Sevens, you've got, there's even World Rugby Under 20 Championship that I might get involved in as well. There's so many different things
too, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much work that if you did want to get into commentary, now's a good time, because one person or a group of commentators can't even cover all of those. You really need to stretch the limits, and that's why it's good too to see a lot more female voices coming to the fore as well. I thought Katie Worth did a brilliant job on the commentary in Chicago, and getting more female commentators involved is certainly what we need as well.
Yeah, no, speaking of female commentators, the public really wants to know when are we going to see Verity and Dallen in the booth?
Well, I tell you what, it was so funny we put up that one clip because we had a lot of good chirps, and I get out chirped there. A lot of people said they would rather see and hear Verity than my voice, so yeah, I take that. I asked if she wanted to do some more commentary, and she's like, you talk a lot of the rugby. She likes just to shred a few here and there. So you're right, we should get her on again and get a couple of highlights wrapped up there.
Yeah, and like I was telling you before on the pre-show, I had spoken to a couple of people in the community to see sort of what they wanted to know about you, and every single person mentioned that video that you posted of you two shredding. I believe it was the All Black South Africa game, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yes, it was amazing.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Okay, well, good. Well, tell her.
Mate, that's great insight into the world of commentating and sort of the prep work. I don't think a lot of people get to see or understand sort of how much goes into that. So it's pretty cool to get a window into that. So thanks for sharing. Something else that, you and I are both connected to now and we're very passionate about is the Premiership Scholarship Tours in 2019, right? Can you tell me a little bit about how the 2018 trip went and sort of how that came about? And then, what are we looking forward to here in the future with those?
Yes. So in ahead of the 2018 scholarship trip, Premiership and Friends of the British Council, alongside with AEG Rugby, who had put on the match in Philadelphia between Newcastle and Saracens, and NBC had some input as well. It was an interesting time for us because we knew that together as a group we could help improve and develop the rugby and different forms of the game in a DUS, but what would that look like? And so initially we thought, well, let us offer an opportunity to players and coaches, take a pilot group overseas and see how that goes. And of course, we were lucky enough to have you on that group as well this year actually. And in our evaluation afterwards, while it is an amazing experience for young players to go to England and travel, there are a lot of opportunities for players to do that, if they make representative teams and that sort of thing. And then you've got touring sides as well, like Salty Thompson has his brilliant program. You have, Atlantis, and you've got Julie McCoy's one. You've got so many other organizations and Tiger Rugby, of course, that are traveling. So we thought, okay, let us take a step back. And if we just focus on coaches, could we have a greater impact in the community, plus deliver because last time we delivered some coach education, but it wasn't streamlined towards where the participants received any certification. Right. And also following up from that, Premiership Rugby at that stage hadn't built an online platform which coaches have access to, so that the learning is continuous. As they leave England, they still have ways to keep in touch, and if they want to develop their game further as a coach. So those kind of initiatives came out afterwards, and so after evaluating it, we thought, all right, let us take two groups instead to England in the space of 1 year, about 25 per group. We obviously want to get the opportunity to female coaches and male coaches, and It doesn't matter if you have it level 300 already, because as we know in the States that happens over a weekend. It's a pretty quick crash course, but then there's nothing that follows up afterwards, again, because resources are limited. So with this new angle, I really think we are covering the elements of the continuous education and employability for coaches in the States for 2019 and 2020. And we, of course, want to continue this every year where we take a minimum of 50 coaches overseas.
Right. And the trip last year was amazing. And obviously it was the first, sort of iteration of that and getting it off the ground. And you've obviously seen sort of the little reunions we have, the chat groups we have going on. It's really nice to see that moving forward, coach development is at the forefront. Is, in my personal opinion and belief, is coach development is going to be the key to growing the game. There's tons of players, but you have to have enough coaches in order to facilitate that growth. So I think it's huge that Premiership Rugby and Friends of the British Council are getting behind this and moving forward. Is the application process currently open at this time?
Yes, good question. So firstly, to your point, I agree 100%, and that's kind of where we are now as a initiative in terms of the greatest impact we can have is helping our coaches. And also at the end of the day, how many opportunities do we get as a coach to know, hey, listen, I want a free trip, not just to get a certification, but to go to England, to go overseas, to experience, a new culture, but then also, as you experienced, to go inside behind the scenes, behind the scenes at Twickenham, the rugby school, to go to, 2 or 3 Premiership level clubs and get to speak to the people there, even appearing at Westminster Abbey, things like that, which, I've been in rugby for a long time. I've never experienced any of those things. So for me, just as a fan of the game, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And it's kind of cool because I know I was talking to you a lot and saying, hey, give us feedback, tell us what we can improve. And the application process is everyone goes to premiershiprugbysscholarships.co.uk. That's how they can apply. And the application is going to be open for another 4 weeks. So it'll close December 16, 2018. Okay. And that'll just be for coaches that are living in America, anywhere in the 50 states. They want to go for free. Just submit a video, 90-second video, and there are details if they go to that website that explain what they need to include in the video. They can keep it short and sweet. And again, as I said, that is for their first trip, and those coaches will go to England around about March 17th to the 24th. And then there'll be another trip in the fall, dates to be confirmed, but about October, November time period, and that's the next group that will travel as well. Because some people mention, hey, listen, if I win and I can't travel, what will happen? Well, you'll go the next trip, and if you can't make the next trip, well, then you'll go the following year. So either way, if you've won, you're in, and you're going to have it. One of your dreams will come true.
That's awesome. Where can people find the guidelines, sort of what those videos look like? And is there anything for things you would like to see them do or talk about in those videos? Is there a place to find those?
Yes, exactly. So I think the best link is premiershiprugbysscholarships.co.uk. Okay. If you type that link, you'll be redirected to a page straight away, which gives the initial press release news, and then halfway through the page it says how to win, and there's a section about how to submit your video, which link to go to, what social media hashtag to use, and then the next paragraph says what should be included in this video, and it lists out the detailed things. I will say the easiest thing to do is to give a little bit of your background in the sport and show your passion of how you deliver rugby's values, in your everyday coaching and things like that. They're not so looking for a coach that has been coaching for 25 years plus and has a brilliant resume. It's really a coach that is very keen on getting better and embodies the values of the sport, is a good person, and will benefit from this. I think that's the main thing. And for example, last year we had a great video from a coach called Nusi out of Hawaii, who just said, listen, I am very limited in my knowledge of coaching. Don't send me. But I feel my kids, my young girls in the program deserve a better coach. Boom, in straight away. Don't even have to say anything more than that. And so that's kind of what we would advise. Of course, have fun with it as well, because rugby is a game that should be enjoyed by everybody, and even coaches too.
Yeah, Nusi was actually one of my favorites on the trip last year. Just so humble and had a lot of good stories from Hawaii and sort of what they were going through in terms of growing pains. And I've been watching them on social media, and he's doing a hell of a job over there. In terms of this next year's trips, are we going to see a lot of the same sort of, obviously we're going to be working with, or the scholars will be working with the clubs. Are we going to see very similar trips to like the rugby school, to Twickenham? My favorite, up at the O2, climbing the O2 arena. I know you love that one as well. Are we going to see things like that again?
Snacks, I will say I have got some great photos of how nervous a lot of us were going up that steep incline. Yes, so what we'll do is that one probably won't be in it, but definitely, going to see a Gallagher Premiership fixture, visiting Twickenham, going behind the scenes, exploring rugby school, being a guest on BT Sport, the show with Rugby Tonight, Westminster Abbey, historical tour of London we will do as well, with a proper guided tour this time. So the nice thing is we've taken some of the tweaks out of it. There was some transportation things we've now solved, and then also when we visit the clubs, let's say the first trip goes to Saracens, Harlequins, and London Irish. At each club, we will deliver a portion of the level 300 coaching course. So at least that will be delivered on site there by certified World Rugby and Premiership staff. And then also we'll have a USA Rugby coach educator with us co-delivering the curriculum. So we have that. Plus, then there'll be breakout sessions. We didn't get to that last time, so maybe a breakout session from the Saracens mental strength coach, and then maybe the Harlequins, trainer gives us something else when we're there. So each club will have something slightly different they deliver, and it'll all be in unison. They will know the schedule ahead of time, so we're not doing the same thing at the different clubs. So I feel like this second iteration is really going to be extremely powerful. The first one was fantastic, but this one is really going to deliver on everything we need to.
Yeah, and powerful is a good word to describe these trips. My group, the scholars that came back after, every man and woman and player in the group were mentioning, how do we earn this on the back end? Like, what do you need us to do? And it's been nice to work with you and to work with Aaron and the different folks at the Premiership, Charlotte and Wayne, obviously, and get more press out there, get more exposure for this program, because hands down, it's the best coaching development tool that I've been involved in. And I just really hope other people get involved and put those videos in. Even if you think you're not going to make it, put a video in, and chances are you have just as good a shot as everybody else. Would you agree to that?
I will reveal something else. So last time, I know that not everybody found out about the news. Now we have USA Rugby promoting it, sending it to their database, putting on social media. People are following Premiership. They're doing a good job of promoting it, and we will in the next 4 weeks. We didn't have many female coach videos last time, so the chances of winning were so high that if you just put a video in and said you were a female coach, you basically almost won. So that's not to take away from the candidates we selected, but I'm just saying there weren't as many as we would hope. And so the trick now is I do hope that we have hundreds of applications, that even if you don't get selected this time, don't forget there is another one coming up in the fall. And so we are going to use the same videos as well and go back and see, oh, well, you know what, these were great candidates that never got a chance to travel. And the fact that we're sending 50 coaches, last time only 14 coaches went, so that's 3.5 times more than last time. And that's only 1 year. I would say, in a way, it would be weird if you weren't selected. You know what I mean? And so in that regard, I think everybody needs to apply. Even if people are nervous for being on camera, I've seen people do brilliant jobs of writing out what they want to say and then having their computer record, and then they just read what they wrote, and it's coming across very nicely. And so everyone should go. And of course, if you're not checking out the news, go to USA Rugby. They have it all over their social media, and Premiership Rugby, and of course, Friends of the British Council as well.
Yeah. Fun fact, my video took me about 50 takes, and just recording the video was such a good professional development tool for me that now I have a podcast. And it gave me the confidence to speak and do all that other stuff. So it was great.
Well, not only do you have a podcast, you are the face of the program, because Premiership Rugby released that great video of your interview in the arena. And Snacksy, you're taking this game. Next thing we'll see you, in the commentating world.
Yeah, I like to be the guy behind the guy. So no to commentating. And, if anybody knew how scared and nervous I was on top of the O2, I remember looking at you and I had that harness on, which wasn't attached to anything. And I was like, this is the only thing keeping me safe right now. And you're like, Snacksy, you've got to take this off. We have to see the logo. And I was like, I'm going to murder you right now. And I could barely speak at points. I'm glad that they got a little bit and they used it. My Twitter reach got 200,000 the other day. It was pretty cool. But
that's amazing. That's amazing. See, no big deal. No big deal. The Snackscast dominating the world. You heard it here first. Keep the change. Shut the gates. Snacks have scored.
Yeah. Okay. One question from the community: where do you get your material? Lots of people are wondering if it's Dallen inspired, 12th man inspired.
Yes. I would say this. I would say most of it is just written by myself, and kind of sometimes it's thought of on the spur of the moment. Those are always fun because they're very applicable to what's going on. Some of them are thought in advance, and so and then you need to use the right timing to bring them in. Some of them definitely aren't mine. And so I've definitely used the Honey Badger's line once or something, and then some man chirps here and there. But I think at the end of the day, for me, the way I see it is that, and again, it's been a learning process. So some people love the humor, some people don't. Some events ask for it. So Rugby Town Sevens, they're like, please, come with the one-liners. And so then, it's a long 3-day weekend. You need to prepare for that. Other times it's a test match. They say don't be humorous at all. I've got that from a former CEO that has a British accent. And so that's totally fine. You have to take each job and try to your best ability to please the people hiring you. And so for me, I personally think that having a little bit of humor at times is good and positive. And that's kind of why the Sevens World Series is well received too, because the game itself is very exciting and that's great. But there are times in a 15-a-side game that things do slow down a bit, and if you can bring a little chuckle in here and there for an audience member watching, I know for me personally watching, when I do hear something like that, it kind of brings you closer into the game. You have a laugh. It's just part of life, So that's kind of where it is. But I do have a little notebook that I keep, and every now and again, if I'm driving or on holiday or doing something, and I'm like, this would be funny, Now again, some of them are funny to me and not funny to other people. So I've read my missus a few of my one-liners, if you will, and I'd probably say 40% of the time she just looks at me and shakes her head, and I'm like, okay, let me cross that one out.
Yeah, I know every year at the Rugby Town 7, the Coast Guard guys are just chomping at the bit to see what new material you have on me. I think the all-time favorite, and I don't know if it was you or Dan, but it was never seen him this mad since the TSA took his Skittles. And I was like, oh my God, I couldn't do anything but laugh when I watched the replay. It was awesome.
There's some big times for sure. Oh, and then listen, if I'm going to be adding more designs, I've been pretty slow last year, but I have a couple of t-shirts that I would like. I've got a Champagne Rugby shirt, and then after Ireland beat New Zealand, it said nobody beats Ireland 29 times in a row. So shirts like that, they're available at therugbycorner.com. So
nice. Speaking of future or things that excite you, is there anything on the horizon that you're excited about or you're keen to see come to fruition in the rugby world?
Yes, I think the big one for me is in being in the US since 2003, really excited to see the growth at the youth level. That is really fantastic, and to see non-rugby people get involved and engaged with the game, either through their kids playing. That has really been a special kind of thing to see. Getting stopped at the airport if I'm wearing a rugby shirt and someone's like, oh, rugby, yeah, I just watched the game the other night with the Seawolves are playing. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's great. So those kind of things really excite me. I think hosting a 15s World Cup should be on the horizon. And, I do agree with World Rugby strategy of taking the game to a new place to expose the game and then bringing it back to somewhere local where they can still make it financially viable. So I think that is something exciting. Having the US host a 15s World Cup after the success of the Sevens in San Francisco, that was amazing to see. I think more rugby on television is key to that as well, where Major League Rugby is taking the lead on that. And so that is very exciting, So there's a lot of positive things coming through, and it's taken a while to get here. I think a lot of people thought the tipping point was the Olympic Games in 2016. It's probably taken a bit longer than most has expected, but we're certainly getting there. And then also with the safety in the game and having rugby experts teach people in football, a few techniques to use. That's very encouraging as well, So there's a lot to be thankful, grateful for, and excited for.
That's awesome. Those are all good things. You say a 15s World Cup, and as an events person, I'm just thinking, wow, that is a lot of work to do. But it would be awesome to host the 15s World Cup on U.S. soil.
Well, and also, it would be a while away, right? I mean, the next one would only be 2027, so we'll give you a few years to prep for that, Snacks.
Yeah. Well, I'm already looking. I'm excited about the Olympics coming to Los Angeles, 2028.
Yes, absolutely. Well, you saw my license plate on the car, my vehicle.
Yes.
So,
yes,
exactly.
I did.
So 2028, that's for the, and again, the missus just shook her head. She's like, what does that even mean? I'm like, rugby in the Olympics in LA, which is like 2 miles from where we live, and it's in 2028. No one else will have a license plate like that.
Yeah, I'll say it here. I'm going to put my name in the hat to try to work the Olympics. That'd be awesome. My hometown, Los Angeles, would be great.
Snacks, it'd be a dream to be in a broadcast booth for that. So I can see us working another classic together.
Yes, which we've done plenty. We have done heaps of events together, and I'm glad that we've sort of built this bond and relationship through our time at events, and obviously the Premiership trip. So.
Well, listen, I want to thank you, Snacks. I want to thank you for everything you do in the sport, and you really are behind the scenes, and I think that's so valuable. Without people like yourself, things wouldn't get done, and they wouldn't get done at the professional level that it needs to. And this Snackscast idea is bloody brilliant, and really appreciate you taking the time to interview folks and get out there, Snacks. And And again, I know that people have said you have a face for radio, but this really is your calling.
Oh, right in the fields, Dallen. Thank you. It's an honor. It's an honor to work in this community and with such great people. And the idea behind the show is just to give a voice and some access to some people that I see at events like you and, Jen Gray and some other folks that I'm planning on interviewing and that people would never come across. I mean, you're all characters in your own right. And it's an honor to sort of put you on a pedestal for a second and, talk with you because I've had thousands of laughs. Can you imagine that half of the conversations we could have recorded in the past? Those are so valuable, it's awesome. But, I guess maybe that's a good stopping point. And I'm sure, if the public wants it, we could do part 2 someday. But I really appreciate you coming on the show, Dallen. And, is there any parting shots, any parting thoughts you'd like to finish with?
Oh, Snacksy, I just think, that, the community, the small niched rugby community is so powerful here in the US, and people come together at times of need. And I really, I want to applaud everybody that gets involved in any level, in any position, whether it's volunteering at their club or working for free and things like that. It has driven the game forward. And we've seen so many great advancement improvements. And I think if you look at the results of our national teams, men and women, that comes from people at the community working with the 5-year-old kids introducing rugby all the way through. So everybody needs to be congratulated on what they're doing. And as a community, we're going stronger, which is really great. And now again, as I said, just super excited for more and more rugby. While the missus might not be happy that every weekend's filled with rugby, it's good for the sport.
Yeah, true. Okay, Dallen. Well, that's it for me. And thanks everybody for tuning into the Snackscast. Have a good day.
Shut the gates.